My name's Paul Schroeder. I also live in Orono. I'm a retired librarian from the University of Maine and part-time faculty, also currently not teaching. First of all, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I know that we each come here with our own personal perspectives and with our own concerns, with our own knowledge. And I think somehow getting people together to be able to discuss and find out and share is really the only way we're going to try to put together the facts on this project. My own personal concern, and it comes out of my previous work as a librarian and my own personal feelings, is that we need to have open process and transparency in our governmental process if we're all going to be partners in projects like this that are going forward. I think it's kind of a misconception that something like this can be purely private. There's a part of it that can be private, maybe the finances, maybe something about the ownership, but nothing like this is a private project. It affects all of us, and that's what we're trying to come up with, that framework that we can understand that piece of it. Now, what I've asked to talk about and what I'm supposed to talk about here are some really big concepts: public process and transparency, local control, eminent domain, and this notion of public-private partnerships, some of which have been discussed before. And so what I'm going to try to do is refer to some of the documents that have come out, refer to some of the laws and policies, and use that as a basis for carrying our own discussions forward. So I'm going to start with some of the things that have already been brought up. What is this project really? What do we know about it? What does it really look like? What does it feel like? Well, first of all, very few facts have come out, and that's been a purposive strategy on the part of the project developers. They have decided to not make parts of this, many parts of this, including where is this road going to go, who's going to own it in the long run, things like this. These aren't part of the public record, so we sort of have to use our imaginations to make up for the facts that aren't available. So what we have to do is kind of put all this together and then use our imaginative process to try to come up with some conclusions as to what it means for us. For myself, what is this project? Starts with two studies that came out in 2008, and I'll just read a couple of passages from each one of them. One of them is this one. It's called East-West Highway Conceptual Feasibility Study, Callis to Coburn Gore, and it was commissioned by Chimbro. The other one is a study that was called the Northeast Can-Am Connections, Integrating Economy and Transportation. Now, these two studies came out within one day of each other, and they were very closely connected to each other. So out of this feasibility study, which is something that Chimbro commissioned themselves, on page 5 here, we read that Chimbro Corporation and the Louis Berger Group have combined resources to promote and develop east-west connectivity to address the needs defined by the Can-Am Connections Hollow Middle and opportunities presented by Canadian Strategic Gateways and Trade Corridors Initiative. Well, so this study, this document that they propose as a study that's a foundation for what they want to do, actually isn't a study at all. It's a promotional document that was written by them in 2008 to connect their work with this Canadian study, which has to do with connecting trade gateways across Canada. So we know right away it's a very unusual kind of a study. The second thing that we find out in here is they say that they're going to make a comprehensive assessment of the adequacy of interstate and cross-border transportation within the Northeast border region. Now they say interstate. Interstate means across states, and they say cross-border. Well, that's between the United States and Canada in this case, but they don't say intrastate. They don't say, what does this have to do with transportation inside our state? In fact, this has nothing to do with transportation inside our state. It has to do with other people's transportation needs. And this is stated very clearly in their documents, and you can go online and find these. These are all available. A lot of them are available through the coalition's website. And I suggest that you pursue these things. On page 4, they claim that they're going to avoid communities, and in fact, this is something that the promoters have come into communities and said, well, we're not going through any communities. Well, we know that there are towns, no matter where this goes, they're going to be divided right in half, and the people who are going to be divided from their neighbors, they know that that's a community. Now, whether this organization thinks that's a community or not, people who live in those places know that these are communities, and they're going to be dramatically affected. Use your imagination. So what about this concept of the hollow middle? We've heard of that before too. They've brought forward the hollow middle, and I always thought, well, the hollow middle, they just didn't quite understand that there's actually something out here that isn't just the hollow middle that needs to be filled. But it turns out that the hollow middle is actually part of their economic development planning, because on their 6-point bullets, pursue 6 economic growth paths, take advantage of strategic location. Number 1 is fill in the hollow middle. That's their goal. They want to fill in the hollow middle. Lack of intra-regional trade. And actually, in their report, they say that by the hollow middle, it means there are no class 1 interstate highways or rail connections. So they want to fill us with highways and world-class rail connections. Okay, that's the hollow middle. Well, now we've got that piece straight. Now we'll go on to what do I think is one concept that holds the different pieces together that I'm kind of looking at here and trying to share. And I think that the concept of sovereignty is one. Sovereignty. I had to look it up. What is sovereignty? There's been talk about sovereignty, and on the dictionary says there's 2 basic definitions for sovereignty. One of them is a very broad, the highest power. It's either royalty or divinity or whatever the highest power that we would appeal to, like that is sovereign. But in this case, sovereignty has more to do with definition 2 in the dictionary: independence, autonomy, freedom from external control. That's sovereignty. And each one of us has a kind of is a sovereign. We're sovereign over ourselves. We have a certain amount of land that we may or may not control. We have sovereignty within our municipalities, which have certain kinds of rights vis-a-vis the state. The state is sovereign in certain things. But certainly, sovereignty between countries is very important. The Penobscot Nation has sovereignty on for their nation, and we have sovereignty as Americans in the United States. Now, this highway, whatever it is, it's absolutely unique and it's absolutely new. The Bangor Daily last summer had an article, and they headlined it. Get it exactly right here. Unprecedented in North America. We're dealing with something here that has no precedent, that somebody has come up with, that they want to put through, that there's nothing like it anywhere. And what do we know about it? Very, very little. And then the final thing is on the border. This all has to do with the border. How can we get across the border? Who gets to go across the border? What kind of border checks? Peter Mills, who's the director of the Turnpike Authority, has come out several times recently and said, well, I've really been working hard on trying to get expedited treatment for rail freight across the border, and we're getting nowhere with that. But apparently this is all about getting expedited border treatment for trucking. And I don't know how many people have been following or saw these articles about the Canadian cyclists who were planning a tour to Maine. I mean, really, here we've got 2,000 people who want to come to Maine, spend a couple weeks, ride around on our actual roads, spend money. They can't get in, right? They're 2,000 bicyclists due to NAFTA. That's what it says here. Canceled tour blamed on NAFTA. And it turns out that our border controls operate under certain kind of NAFTA restrictions, and they had to do with how this tour was being done. So we can't let the trains come in, and we can't let the bicyclists come in, but we can build a whole specialized highway for the trucks. Somehow there's something that doesn't sound very well planned in this. Okay, what about this public-private partnerships? To be brief about that, I'll get it done in 5 minutes. I appreciate, though, and these are serious time restraints, so we do want to stick to them. Public partnerships, it turns out that in 2010, the people who want this to happen went and got some legislation through the legislature, and that's how it works. If you want something to benefit yourself, go to the legislature and pass a law. I've been active in the West Old Town Juniper Ridge landfill issue for a long time, and that's how they got it going. I mean, they just sat down and they passed a law, and it took away local control, and it said, notwithstanding on any other laws, and we're going to do this, and it was done in a couple days, and we've been basically suffering under this for that long. Well, the public partnership, one thing that it does, and there have been a couple of really important articles within the last a couple days, actually. One was in the Portland Press Herald. You can look it up. It was an op-ed piece by Lindsay Newland Bowker called Highway Privatization Law Compromises Public Oversight. And then there was another one that was in the BDN. I think it was referenced earlier. Bill seeks to lift confidentiality. Well, just briefly on these, there are all kinds of privileges that go along with being a public-private partnership with the DOT under this new law that went through. And one of them is total confidentiality of all proposals. And I'll just read from the law. All records, notes, summaries, working papers, plans, I won't even read them all, under this subchapter are confidential and not subject to public review until the department determines that the proposal meets the standards of this subchapter until it is finally rejected. So in other words, they can do everything without letting anyone else in on their planning process. And when they're done, then they can tell us what's going to happen. So that's what's one of the things that's trying to be repealed now in the legislature are these special privileges for the private public-private partnerships. Eminent domain, I'll just go over that quickly. You may know that there was a Supreme Court decision in 2005, I believe. It was called Kelo versus City of New London, and it turns out that if a agency of the state, municipality, state, whatever, can determine that there's a public benefit to a transfer a transfer of property, that the city can actually take someone's property and turn it over to another private person, and that's legal if the public entity can determine that there's a public benefit to that. Well, right now there are attempts in the state legislature to try to protect local landowners from anything to do with this project being taken by eminent domain. That's going to be very difficult if the state is involved in any way, unless there's actually new court cases or legislation at the federal level, because right now we're operating under this Kelo, and people shouldn't feel very happy or very comfortable that their property can be taken and given over to someone else, maybe someone who wants to build a east-west corridor / highway through this kind of a situation. Well, I'm down to 1 minute, so I'm just going to say that what are my conclusions that I want to kind of leave us with. One of them is that this is an absolutely unique project. There's nothing like it anywhere. We really deserve to know more about it. It raises many questions of ownership and control. The people who are promoting it are saying, well, we can likely this will be under international ownership. It's not going to be owned by the United States, by American companies. And by the way, the whole corridor itself is going to be kind of an internationalized zone. One end will be an international border. The other end will be an international border. There's fencing in between. What does that sound like? Does that sound like it's part of Maine or even the United States? We have to wonder. We've had a serious lack of inclusion in planning. We have a huge amount of uncertainty as what this means to our communities. And we have to wonder, do the same rules apply to all? It really does seem that certain voices are heard much more clearly, and what we need to do is, try to go out and make our voices heard too, if we think this isn't a very good idea. So thank you very much.
Excellent.